Hey there, fellow philosophy fans.
Mm.
We love to get deep in thought here, so today we're tackling a topic that's had philosophers scratching their heads for ages. We're talking about love.
Love, just a word, right? But philosophically, whew, that's a whole thing.
It really is. And to help us make sense of it all, we're going to be using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on love as our guide for this deep dive. We'll be pulling out the key ideas, and wrestling with some of the really head-scratching questions about love.
Sounds like a plan. Always up for a good philosophical wrestling match.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Right off the bat, the Stanford Encyclopedia points out how slippery the word love can be.
Yeah.
We use it for everything, from chocolate to our pets, and of course other humans.
Yeah. And to be clear, they're really focused on personal love, the kind we feel for other people, not, our love for pizza, no matter how much we may crave it.
Yeah, pizza love's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
But it does bring up an interesting point. I mean, I really do love pizza, but do I love it in the same way I love, say, my best friend? I think there's got to be a difference there. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Even the ancient Greeks were hip to that nuance. They had those three classic types of love: eros, agape, and philia.
Okay, yeah, break those down for us. What do those even mean?
All right, so eros, that's like the passionate desire, the fiery, intense kind of longing we often think of with romantic love. And then there's agape, that's more about a selfless, unconditional love, the kind that kind of goes beyond any personal gain. And philia, think of deep friendship, that kind built on shared values and real, genuine affection.
It's wild how these ideas from way back then, they still feel so relevant to us today.
Mm.
Like, have you ever felt that tug of war between that crazy, heart-pounding passion and that, steady warmth of companionship?
Oh, yeah.
That's eros and philia right there, duking it out right in your soul.
Yeah.
And just knowing these different flavors of love, I feel like can help us navigate our own relationships.
Totally. It's a great framework for making sense of, the complex feelings we all have. And it also highlights another philosophical problem: trying to separate love from simply liking something. What is it that makes love deeper, more important than just a passing preference?
Yeah, that's the big question, is that where does that, extra oomph come from?
Well, the Stanford Encyclopedia, it points to this idea of identification as a key part of what makes love so deep. When we really love someone, we kind of identify with them in this really profound way. Their joys and sorrows, they, in a way, become ours too. We start to see their well-being as totally connected to our own?
Okay, yeah, I get that. But it makes me wonder, is there a point where we lose ourselves in the other person? I mean, do we become so entangled that it gets hard to tell where one person ends and the other begins?
Well, that's where the debate gets really interesting. Some philosophers think love is all about creating this a total merging of like selves and interests. Others are more into a balanced view, more like a federation, where individual identities stay separate, but they're still deeply connected.
A federation of selves. Huh.
Mm.
Okay, I kind of like that. It's a much better image than some sci-fi mind meld situation. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. There's a lot more to unpack, especially when we get into those four major theories of love, ready to dive deeper.
Absolutely, let's do it. Let's explore those theories and see what they reveal about this age-old mystery. All right, so we've got these four theories of love we want to unpack here, and they each offer a different way of looking at what love actually is and how it works.
Yeah, think of them as four different lenses we can use to examine this crazy, complicated thing we call love.
Exactly. So the first one up is love as union. Remember that idea of identification we were just talking about?
Yeah, the whole becoming a we thing. Honestly, that part always makes me a little nervous. To really be in love, do we have to completely merge with the other person?
That's the main idea here. Philosophers like Scruton and Solomon, they believe that in true love, the line between me and you, it just dissolves. It's all about this super profound shared identity, like a real fusion of souls, where individual interests just become one.
Okay, hold on. That sounds really intense. Borderline creepy, even. I mean, yeah, do we totally lose our individuality?
Hmm.
And, it makes me think about the potential for someone to take advantage of that. If they really believe that what they want is also what you want, doesn't that open the door for some, messed up stuff?
You're bringing up some of the biggest criticisms of this theory, actually. Philosophers like Singer and Sobel, they've pointed out that this kind of intense union, it can lead to people losing their sense of self and their independence even. It can get hard to tell the difference between real, genuine care and, just being selfish, but dressing it up as concern for the other person.
Right. It's like that whole if you love something, set it free thing. maybe a little space is good for a relationship.
That's a good point. And, to deal with some of these issues, the philosopher Friedman came up with a more subtle version of the union idea. She calls it the federation model. It's still about a we, but individuals keep their own identity within the relationship. So it's less about totally merging and more about a partnership where each person is free to be themselves, but still deeply connected to the other person.
A federation of selves, huh?
Yeah.
That does sound more balanced and less like a Star Trek episode gone wrong. But even so, I still wonder if that union, even a less intense one, is really like the most important thing about love.
That's a fair point. But let's move on for now to the second theory, love as robust concern. Now, this one puts the focus on how deeply and genuinely we care for the other person.
Okay, so maybe it is simpler than all that union stuff.
hmm
Is love just about caring so much about someone that you put their needs before your own?
That's the heart of it, yeah. It's all about a selfless kind of concern for the other person's well-being. You want what's best for them, even if it means you got to sacrifice something you want. Their happiness becomes the most important thing.
I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all make sacrifices for people we love.
Hmm.
But isn't there more to it? It feels kind of cold. Like, what about all those intense emotions? The ups and downs, the intimacy, making yourself vulnerable to someone. Does this theory really explain all of that?
You're right. It can seem a bit too, I don't know, detached if we just focus on care and well-being. And so to add to that, philosopher Wonderly came up with this idea of attachment. Attachment brings in that sense of being really connected emotionally, where your sense of well-being is bound up with how the other person is doing. It kind of adds some depth and warmth to the whole robust concern idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Attachment is definitely a huge part of it. It's not
Yeah.
just about, wanting the best for someone in this like Spock-like logical way. It's about feeling really connected to them on an emotional level.
Exactly. Okay, now we're getting to the third theory, and this is where it gets really interesting. It's called love as valuing, and it gets right at a question that philosophers have been debating forever.
Ooh, I love a good philosophical throwdown. Hit me with it. What's the big question?
It's this. Does love create value, or does it just recognize value that's already there?
Whoa. Okay, now that is a good question.
Yeah.
So is love like this magical thing that adds something special to the person or thing we love? Or are we just noticing qualities that were there all along? It's like, is beauty in the eye of the beholder, or is it really in the object itself?
Perfect analogy. Philosophers are split on this one big time. So you've got the appraisal camp. Thinkers like Velleman, they believe we love someone because we see their inherent worth, their value as a person. It's like Kant's idea of recognizing someone's dignity as a rational being.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. We notice something good about someone, something admirable, and that draws us to them. But then, wouldn't that mean we could basically love anyone as long as we decide they have certain good qualities? What's to stop me from falling head over heels for, like, a houseplant with good vibes?
Uh-huh. I see your point. But Velleman would say, you're mixing up like just having feelings with recognizing someone's dignity. A houseplant, well, they're not exactly a rational being.
Touché. I guess you can't just decide something into existence. But what about the other side of the argument? The one where love is what creates the value.
Right. The bestowal camp, and they've got people like Singer on their side. They say that love isn't just about seeing what's already there. It's about actively choosing to see someone as special, unique. And that act of valuing them, that creates the bond.
Okay, wait. But if I can just decide someone is valuable, doesn't that mean they could be replaced? What's to stop me from trading up for a partner with, like, slightly better qualities? If it's all up to me, it seems like I could just change my mind about who I love whenever I feel like it.
And there you've hit on one of the biggest problems with the bestowal view, the fungibility problem. If we can just give and take away value whenever we want, that specialness of loving one specific person, it just disappears. It's more like, picking your favorite flavor of ice cream than this profound connection.
So both sides of the love is valuing debate have some pretty big hurdles to get over. Where do we go from here?
Well, that takes us to our fourth and final theory, love as an emotion. Sound obvious, right? But when you dig into it, defining love as an emotion is trickier than you might think.
Yeah, I'm curious about this one. Love definitely feels like an emotion. But can philosophers actually figure out what kind of emotion it is? It's such a, complicated, messy experience.
It's definitely not easy. It's not like we can just say, oh, love is happiness or love is sadness. There are a bunch of different ways to think about love as an emotion.
Okay, so break it down for us. What are the different ways of looking at love through an emotional lens?
So one approach is to see love as this one single emotion with its own special qualities. For example, the philosopher Brown, he talks about cherishing as the core of love. Other folks, like Hamlin, they suggest that love and hate, those are the primal emotions, like the basic building blocks that all our other emotions come from.
So either it's one big, powerful emotion, or it's these two opposite forces that shape everything else we feel.
Right. But then there's another whole approach that says actually love isn't just one emotion, but a whole bunch of them, all mixed together, changing and growing over time.
That makes sense. Love doesn't stay the same forever. It changes as we experience things together,
Hmm.
all the joy and sadness, the anger, and everything else that goes with being in a relationship.
Exactly. So you've got Rorty talking about the historicity of love, how it's shaped by our shared past, the things we've been through together. And then there's Bear, who talks about emotional interdependence, how one person's feelings affect and change the other person's feelings. And Badwar points out how important the look of love is, the way we communicate all these complex emotions without even saying a word.
So love as an emotion is a whole lot more than we might think at first. It's not just one feeling, but this like super complex web of all kinds of different emotional threads.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And now that we've gone through these four theories, each with its own take on what love is, I think we can move on to another big question. Why do we love at all? What's the point of this whole thing?
So we've talked about these four big series of love, and they all have their pluses and minuses. But I feel like there's this even bigger question we haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've explored what love is, but now we have to get into the why.
Exactly. Why do we even love in the first place? Is it just a selfish thing, or is there some deeper meaning to it? Can we actually justify having this messy, complicated emotion?
Man, those are the questions philosophers have been trying to crack for like forever. And the answers, well, they're not always so simple.
All right, well, let's get into it. What are some of the ideas philosophers have come up with to explain why we love?
So, some philosophers think that love helps us learn about ourselves. Like the philosopher Badwar, he says that the people we love, they act like mirrors, reflecting back parts of ourselves we might not see otherwise.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But also, doesn't that make us sound a little, self-centered? Like, if
Mm.
we're just looking for reflections of ourselves, are we really seeing the other person for who they are?
That's a good point. The philosopher Brink, he says that we shouldn't just be looking for mirror images when we're in love. To really grow, we need to connect with people who are different from us, people who challenge our ideas and help us see the world in new ways.
I see what you mean. It's about finding that balance between recognizing ourselves in someone else and appreciating them for their own uniqueness.
Yeah, exactly. And even if we don't take that mirror thing literally, the people we love can still help us understand ourselves better. Bedwar calls this the epistemic significance of love. They give us this unique perspective on our thoughts and feelings and actions. They help us see ourselves more clearly.
So love can be a way to learn about ourselves as long as we're actually open to what the other person has to teach us. But it seems like there are some pretty obvious, practical benefits to love too, right? It makes us feel happier, more connected. Like it's good for us in a lot of ways.
Totally. There's a ton of research now that shows how good love is for us,
Mm.
both mentally and physically. And some philosophers, like Friedman, they even say that feeling a special kind of connection to the people we love, it's actually morally good.
Wait, are you saying it's a good thing to play favorites? That goes against like every rule I learned in kindergarten.
Haha, no, it's not about being unfair or anything. Friedman's point is that those really strong bonds we have with the people we love, they're crucial for building strong, supportive relationships. And those relationships are like the building blocks of a good society. They give us a sense of belonging, purpose, and meaning in life.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like we need those strong, loving relationships to thrive as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. And then there's the philosopher Solomon. He adds another layer to this. He says that we love because we bring out the best in each other. Like there's this element of self-improvement mixed in with love.
I like that. It's like love pushes us to grow. We challenge each other. We support each other's dreams. We help each other become better people.
Right. But it does bring up some tricky questions too. Like, are we really loving the other person for who they are right now? Or are we just drawn to the person we think they could become? Are we using love to get something instead of just valuing it for what it is?
Yeah, those are some big questions.
Yeah.
Seems like love always has this back and forth between being selfless and selfish.
Definitely. And that push and pull, that's part of what makes love so complex and interesting. It's not just this simple feeling with one clear purpose. It's a whole experience with lots of different motivations and outcomes.
So after going through all these theories and ideas, what are we left with? What's the takeaway for our listeners who are, trying to figure out this whole love thing for themselves?
I think the Stanford Encyclopedia and our deep dive today, they both show us that it's okay to embrace the complexity. There isn't just one right answer to what is love or why do we love. But by thinking about these different perspectives, we can start to understand just how nuanced and powerful this emotion is. And maybe that can help us navigate our own relationships with more, like, awareness and thoughtfulness.
I agree. Love isn't this fixed, unchanging thing. It grows and changes over time, shaped by our experiences, the choices we make, and the unique dynamics of each relationship.
Absolutely. And remember that question about whether love is fungible, like can anyone else do? It makes us think about whether the person we love is truly irreplaceable or if it's more about the role they play in our lives.
Yeah, that's a really powerful question. It gets right at what makes a particular love special and meaningful. Is it really about that specific person with all their quirks and flaws, or is it more about what they bring to our lives? It's a question worth sitting with for a while.
It really is. And maybe the answer is different for everyone.
Well, dear listeners, that's something to ponder as you go about your day. Think about how reason and emotion and your own personal experiences all come together in your own experience of love. Maybe the fact that we can't totally figure it out is part of what makes love so fascinating.
Maybe that's part of its beauty. Love doesn't fit into neat little philosophical categories. It's too wild and free for that.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the philosophy of love. Until next time, keep thinking, keep asking questions, and keep loving in all its messy, beautiful complexity.